Clara pulled her hand back too quickly, as if his touch might burn her. Maybe it already had. No man had ever looked at her like that before, like the past wasn't a curse stitched into her skin. Most men wanted proof of innocence, of purity, of something untouched they could claim and brand as theirs. But this cowboy with dust on his boots and steadiness in his eyes, he looked like he wanted nothing but the truth. She hated it. She needed to hate it, because if she didn't, her walls would crumble, and she couldn't afford to be defenseless again. "I mean it," she said, forcing her voice firmer than her heart allowed. "I'm not some untouched flower. If you're looking for that, you're wasting your time." Wyatt leaned back, his chair creaking against the wooden floorboards. The lamplight caught the edge of his jaw, sharp as flint, but softened by the faintest smile that wasn't mocking, wasn't cruel. It was the kind of smile a man wore when he'd already seen storms, already survived them, and had no reason to fear the rain anymore. "Darling," he said in that slow drawl, "I wasn't looking for a flower. I was just wondering if you'd let me walk you home." Clara's throat tightened. She didn't know what home was anymore. She didn't know if she'd ever had one, but something in his tone told her he wasn't talking about buildings or walls. He meant safety, belonging, things she had buried long ago. So she lied. "I don't need walking." She gathered her shawl and rose, the scrape of her chair loud in the quiet inn. Her legs wobbled, but pride stiffened them. She would leave, she decided, before he could make her believe. But Wyatt didn't stop her. He didn't chase. He just tipped his hat, eyes glinting like he already knew she'd come back. And that was worse than any chasing could have been. Outside, the town was settling into silence. Lanterns flickered in windows. Horses stamped restless hooves in the stables. Clara pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, the night air colder than she expected. She hated the way her heart still beat too fast, replaying his voice, his hand, his words, "I never asked you to be." She walked the dirt street alone, every step sinking into dust like a reminder she'd never be clean again. That was the truth she lived with. No train, no town, no cowboy could change it. And yet, she glanced back. Through the inn window, she caught sight of him still sitting there relaxed, sipping from his glass as if he had all the time in the world. Not watching her, not following, just waiting. Something twisted in her chest. She spun on her heel and hurried to the rented room above the mercantile, where the thin mattress and the four splintered walls didn't ask questions. She shut the door too hard, leaned against it, and finally let the tears sting her eyes. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of hooves. The sun painted the room gold, and dust swirled in the beams like tiny ghosts. She forced herself up, washed quickly, and tied her hair back. She needed work, something to keep her hands busy and her mind away from cowboys with patient eyes. The general store owner's wife had promised she might need help stocking shelves, and Clara clung to that hope like a lifeline. She straightened her dress, gathered her bag, and stepped outside. But of course he was there. Wyatt leaned against the post again, his horse tied loosely nearby, as if he'd been waiting hours but didn't mind. He tipped his hat when she looked at him, not moving closer, not intruding. "Morning, Clara," he said, as if he'd always known her name. Her chest tightened. "How do you—" "The innkeeper told me," he said simply. "Small town, folks talk." She bristled. "Then you know enough to stay away." He studied her a moment, then shrugged. "Don't figure I know near enough, but I reckon I'll learn what you choose to tell me." Something in his calmness infuriated her. He wasn't pushing, wasn't begging, wasn't trying to own her like other men had. That made it worse, because it gave her no excuse to hate him. She brushed past him, muttering, "I have work." "I'll walk you," he said. "I told you." "I know." His boots scuffed quietly beside hers as he fell into step anyway. "But I wasn't asking." The morning sun broke across the plains like a slow fire, spilling its light over the roofs of the small town. Clara stood at the edge of the porch, her shawl pulled close, staring at the road that wound out toward the horizon. She had thought distance would give her peace. She had thought new towns and new names could bury what she carried. But shame was a shadow, faithful, loyal, and impossible to outrun. Behind her, the door creaked. Wyatt stepped out, boots thudding softly against the wood. He didn't come close, didn't crowd her, just stood near enough that she could feel his presence like a steady hand on her back. "You're leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. Clara tightened her grip on the shawl. "It's what I do." Wyatt nodded slowly, gaze fixed on the rising sun. "And how's that been working for you?" Her jaw clenched. She hated how his voice could slip past every wall she built. She hated how he didn't sound angry or accusing, just curious, as though her life mattered enough to ask. "I survive," she said. "Surviving ain't the same as living." The words cut deeper than she wanted to admit. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to look at him. "You don't understand. You don't know what I've done, what people say. I'm not—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "I'm not worth this." Wyatt shifted his weight, crossing his arms over his chest. His eyes, steady as riverstone, locked on hers. "Clara, I never asked for your past. I asked for your hand. That's all." Her breath caught. The world felt too quiet around them. The only sound, the creak of the boards, beneath their feet, and the distant whicker of his horse. "You don't know what you're saying," she whispered. "I reckon I do." His voice softened. "And I reckon you're the only one who don't." By noon the town had already begun to stir with gossip. Clara could feel eyes following her wherever she went, the women in their bonnets whispering outside the mercantile, the men leaning against posts with too long stares. She had lived this before. Whispers grew into stories, and stories grew into chains. But Wyatt, he walked beside her through the main street as if none of it touched him. When one of the men muttered something crude under his breath, Wyatt didn't break stride, but his gaze snapped so sharp it silenced the man mid-laugh. Clara saw it, felt it, and something inside her shifted. For years, she had believed she deserved every cruel word, every sideways glance. But the way Wyatt looked at her, like she was more than the sum of her sins, was undoing everything. She thought she knew about herself. It scared her more than any rumor ever could. That evening the past finally came knocking. She had just finished stacking crates behind the mercantile when a voice, cold and familiar, froze her in place. "Well, if it ain't Clara Mayfield!" Her blood turned to ice. She turned slowly, and there he was, Jonas Carver. The man who had once promised her forever, then left her with nothing but scars. His smile was the same as ever, sweet to strangers, venom to her. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was brittle glass. Jonas tipped his hat, stepping closer. "Heard there was a woman here trying awful hard to play the saint. Figured I'd come remind folks who you really are." Clara's breath caught. She knew that look in his eyes. He was here to ruin her, just as he always had. But before she could speak, a shadow moved from the corner of the stable. Wyatt stepped forward, slow and steady, his hat pulled low, his jaw tight as stone. "You got business here, Carver?" Jonas laughed, but it cracked at the edges. "Just paying respects to an old flame." Didn't realize she had herself a bodyguard. Wyatt's voice was quiet, but it carried like thunder. "She don't need a bodyguard. She's got me." The street seemed to hold its breath. Jonas's smirk faltered just for a second. Clara felt something she hadn't in years. Safety. Later, when Jonas finally slunk away with his threats half swallowed, Clara turned to Wyatt. Her hands trembled, and she hated it. "You don't know what you've done," she whispered. Wyatt studied her, then shook his head. "No, Clara, you don't know what I've done. I've chosen you. That's all that matters." Tears burned her eyes, but this time they weren't only made of shame. They carried something heavier, stronger, something that looked almost like hope.